Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Sinks, Marketing Director with Compliance Group. I want to officially welcome you to Season 3 of the CSA Revolution series, and we really are appreciative and thankful of having today's panelists with us today as well. Today is all about how can we help you accelerate your Industry 4.0 strategy with CSA. Let me quickly introduce these individuals, and then I will pass the baton to Khaled. So first off, I have Louie Rayal from Abbott. He is the Senior IT Quality, Regulatory, and Compliance Director. He has been in the industry for over 25 years, specifically around applications delivery, quality compliance, and governance, specifically within the life sciences industry. Louie, welcome to today's discussion.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Garth Conrad. He is the Vice President of Quality with Flex Health Solutions. They're located, actually, he's in San Jose, where their headquarters is at. He oversees different business segments specific to design, manufacturing, products for OEMs within the med device and pharmaceutical market segments within the Flex organization. He is also a part of the FIXA, the FDA industry computer software assurance team, and he has past experience with Medtronic and Johnson & Johnson. Garth, welcome to today's discussion.
Thanks, Chris.
And next up, Mr. Mohamad AlMasri from, he's the founder and president of Qryptek Consultant, as well as the EVP and CIO of Hematogenix Laboratory Services. He's responsible for the strategic direction and execution with Hematogenix's global IT operations. He also serves as a principal advisor to organizations for providing oversight for information systems and helping those folks drive optimization and inefficiencies, across multiple platforms. Mohamad, welcome to today's discussion.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone.
And last but not least, our moderator, affectionately known as DJ Khaled, Mr. Khaled Masali. He is our Executive Vice President of Client and Regulatory Relations. He has over 20 years of experience in IT, manufacturing, and quality. He's been instrumental in the MDIC Case for Quality initiatives, as well as a founding member of the FDA Industry CSA team, specifically contributing to the FDA draft guidance with CSA, also known as Computer Software Assurance, and a ton of experience with ISPE GAMP as well. Khaled, want to welcome you in helping us moderate today's invigorating discussion with our panelists today. The floor is now yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chris. And thank you for my guest and friends, panelists. You know, you mentioned something about MDIC. I think Garth was one of the very, very early driver of MDIC. For those of you who do not know MDIC, we probably touch on it a little bit, where the Case for Quality initiative kicked off, and I know Garth was way ahead of us there, and where CSA kind of was born as well. So thank you, Garth, for kicking it off back then, and I got the pass and I'm moving it forward. So we appreciate you there. And again, another common thing among these gentlemen, they're all clients of Compliance Group. Not only that, they're all three of them, gentlemen, they're believers in the computer software assurance, the risk-based approach, and applying it and digitizing it. And Flex and Qryptek have moved toward that, and I'll stop right there. Again, I appreciate the initiative and the willingness to digitize and move forward, right? This is where we are today, 2022, and you still look back and you still see certain organizations still working on papers, sign, and they email, send, have big file cabinet, fireproof. We need to move away from that, right? So these folks have already done that in their organization, and they're here to really give you their side of the story, where they've been, where they're moving to, and the value added so far in their organization. One more commonality across two individual here, Flex and Abbott. And I would like to actually ask Garth, since he supports Louie Abbott, if you can tell us who you are and how do you support Abbott, and also Mohamad, how you support Abbott too, because again, all of us in this industry, we all work together, and we either partner somewhere or work together. So I just want you to really know what the relationship between these three individuals. So Garth, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So Flex is a contract manufacturing organization, or contract manufacturing and design. And as such, we do quite a bit of work for most of the large OEMs within the medtech realm, Abbott being one of our most significant customers. So the interesting thing is, as Abbott is going through this transition into CSA, we're going through this transition at the exact same time. So it's been great to hear what the successes and challenges have been on the other side, knowing what they are within Flex as well. And we're hoping to take a lot of these key learnings and be able to apply them to a number of our other major medtech companies that we work with.
Awesome, thank you. Did you hear when he said significant client? I'll keep it at that. Mohamad, please, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Abbott and what you support and how you support Abbott?
Sure. So from Hematogenix perspective, Hematogenix is a global clinical reference laboratory, and we're engaged with Abbott as well as other, large clients in the pharmaceutical industries, and we support them on their ongoing oncology clinical trials, and we work with them day in and day out on the implementation of best practices, on finding the best outcomes for the clinical trials, supporting, of course, at the end of the day, the patient health, and trying to create a difference in that industry.
Awesome, and not to forget that Qryptek is the IT service provider. Thank you for encouraging Hematogenix to digitize and move to paperless validation. Louie, we'll give you a word here. I mean, I'm sure you feel like a king now. You got your support there. Is there anything you'd like to add here?
I just want to add to what you how you kind of open this up with a collaboration, that it's, regardless if you're a vendor or a client or in the services industry, et cetera, it sounds like we're all in it together. And I think it's great to see that from the different angles, the different companies are kind of going in the same direction, which is simplification and applying ways that we can deliver more for less and still be compliant, which is really the main goal as well. So just want to add that.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for that. And it's really all about, at the end of the day, the patient, right? It's all about sustaining life and saving lives. All right, we're gonna move on a little bit here. Guidance, which many of you are still waiting for, and I'm not sure why you're still waiting for, but that's a different story. But anyway, just want to share with you this. Big thanks to the FDA Industry CSA team, and that's a collection of not only medical device, it's biotech, pharma, and medical device, and of course the FDA and MDIC. All right, disclaimers here. So panels today, they're really going to share their opinions, right? We don't want to get them in trouble. This is how they feel. This is what they're going to talk about. So no, you cannot tell them, oh, so is all of Abbott doing this, or all of Flex is doing that, right? Let's just focus on, on the individual, on their opinion. Yes, they're all going to be talking about the risk-based approach that they've really been working on and they implemented. And the most important part is digitization. This is where gonna hear a little bit about Industry 4.0 from our friend Garth, right? And he's gonna walk us through what it is and how really we can take advantage of CSA. From a moderator perspective, I know the draft guidance in its final stages, okay? I know it's coming in fiscal year 2022. Well, where is it? Well, I know one information that some of you may not. It has passed the attorney's review. So I think we're in a much better place than we were 4.5 years ago. Because for those of you who are following us on those webinars, we keep promising you this year. It's not me promising you, it's the FDA, it's the government, right? But again, do we really need to wait for that piece of paper to come out to comment and also criticize? Because as human, we're always going to criticize and we're always going to make our opinion counts. Well, we have plenty of guidance to really talk to, right? The 21 CFR 820, GPSV, GAM5, the new GPG, Data Integrity by Design. There's a whole chapter, 22 pages on CSA. And then the latest one is enabling innovation about critical thinking. So for those of you in the industry, please go ahead within your organization. I'm sure you've got a program where you subscribe for ISPE. Go ahead and purchase those. It is very important because that is what you have today about CSA beside Khaled and these gentlemen telling you about CSA. So this is enough about CSA for now. Chris, did you want to say something? Because you already popped in.
I'm going to launch the first
Can
poll
you ask
question,
me?
folks. So the poll question is, as Cal was just talking about CSA, is we want to better understand where you're at today. Are you ready to transition from CSV to CSA? So enter in your responses right now. Is the answer yes? Is it no, not yet? Is it heck yes, we've already been doing it? Or is the answer yes, but you're running into, you know, some potential internal cultural barrier issues? So yeah, so if looking at this feedback, the majority of you are absolutely ready to transition from CSV to CSA. Some of you say no, and some of you are doing it. And then, yeah, some of you want to do it. You're just running into cultural barrier issues. So I'm going to pass it back to Khaled.
Okay, so I did mention that I'm going to have my colleague, Garth, Conrad, talk about 4.0. So another industry 4.0 speaker. Not again. So Garth, please walk us through.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone, and thanks again. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and talk here. Again, for those of you that have sat through a number of Industry 4.0 or 4.0 discussions, we're not here to teach you what that is. I will go through a little bit of the basics of what it is in case you haven't heard, but this is not to teach you exactly what 4.0 is. It's really to give you some information about how people are leveraging CSA to help the approach or help the drive within their company to sort of help incorporate or drive that 4.0 strategy. So if you go one more slide. So here's the 4 revolutions within the industry. And you can see, as you go back, you can read a lot of material that's out there about the first industrial revolution, the second being electrification, the third being automation, and where we are today under Industry 4.0 is really around companies transitioning the activities that they perform within their business to more of an electronic, digital, cyber, cloud, whatever terminology you want to use. And the challenge that comes along with that, whether we look at it as manufacturing processes or the systems that you're using within the company, the challenge becomes, how do you integrate them all together? How do you make them connect? How do you make them talk? And really, how do you drive that digital business between yourself, your customers, and your suppliers, and everything else that you're doing as a company? Now, I think what's important to consider as part of this as well is that, you know, there's always been a strategy around quality within companies. And this quality 4.0 that sort of aligns with the Industry 4.0 piece is about taking the standard, the really proven out methods of quality for products and processes and systems that we utilize. And how do you do the same thing there? How do you digitize those processes? How do you utilize the information that's now available in a much broader forum because you've digitized all of your manufacturing processes or your systems that go along with that? So how do you incorporate in the data and potentially AI solutions to help you understand better how the company is performing? Now, when you look at all of this, the most critical thing we keep talking about is digital, 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 which means somewhere in there, there's software that's being used to help drive this. And that software, if we think back to what we've been doing for 30 years under the CSV methodology, now think that as you transition your company more to digital, more software that's out there, more systems that are integrated from a cloud solution perspective, you've got more work that you're doing to try to control, try to validate the systems. Now that they're all integrated together, that becomes much more complex in terms of how you're managing the impact of one system versus another system. So CSA is the perfect complement to all of that, because what it allows you to do is apply a risk-based approach to how those activities need to be done. If you did them the old way, I would say, back up some 18-wheelers in terms of your trucks for storage of all the paper that you're going to create. If you do it under a CSA methodology, the advantage is you reduce a lot of the burden from the paperwork perspective. Now, the next step, the next evolution that goes along with that, the same transition within Industry 4.0 and Quality 4.0 is now take a look at your validation processes that you're doing. Why do you need to continue to do them in paper? Everybody else, or all of the other systems that your company is looking at, are also transitioning to a digital format and content that's there. The CSA methodology, or software validation as a whole, becomes a perfect situation to digitize that process as well. The advantage you have of doing that is now where CSA reduces some of the burden or the activity by applying a risk-based approach, you can eliminate some of the potential defects or problems that you have during software validation by digitizing. How many on the phone have been through a software validation where you get to the end and you figure out that one of your user requirements hasn't traced all the way through your system, so you haven't completed one of the activities that's necessary? The advantage of a digitization process built into that is you now have that direct linkage. So well before you get to the end of a program or the end of a validation activity, you know that you have gaps in the things that you're completing. So that digitization of the CSA process, of the validation process, gives you further enhancement to the things that you're doing. And with that, I'll kick it back to Khaled.
Thank you, Garth. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. A little bit of glitch. This is what happened when you don't validate your headset with your laptop. But I did not do CSA. I did the CSV. That's why it wasn't working. So thank you for answering this, because really my question was, how does CSA support the Industry 4.0? And I clearly answered that question. Now, just a question to really to Mohamad. I know, Mohamad, you and I, we've got some discussion in the past talking about AI and ML. And I would love for that specific discussion, in your opinion, of AI and ML and where it's going and how something like CSA will actually support it. Can you just share a little bit of that knowledge?
Sure. So just want to make sure you guys can hear me too?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So that's a great question, Khaled. When it comes to AI, obviously, and machine learning and predictive analysis, this is where everything is going today. And I can't think of any other area that is better fit, at least in our industry, than CSA for AI and machine learning, because you can implement that heads on right away with every single aspect. So when it comes to obviously the automation of the testing, you have to find a really good tool that is going to allow you to adapt, because the process, as I saw from the poll that Chris just launched, a lot of people, they're actually struggling. I think it was 25%, if I recall correctly, that they want to implement CSA, but they're having some internal issues or challenges. And implementing a digitization tool or an AI tool, for example, like Valerian, that compliance group works with, helped us tremendously, let's say, at least in our experience, implementing the necessary workflows that we need to use to implement the CSA concept. And the shifting of mentality, honestly, from CSV approach to a CSA approach. First, you need to educate yourself. You need to become subject matter experts, because that's gonna assure you that you're going to follow the best industry standards. And then when you go to sell the concept internally to your company, you have to get the buy-in from quality, for example. You have to get the buy-in from your upper management. You have to make sure that they understand it. They're going to come back to you with a lot of challenging questions. And that's why obtaining the necessary knowledge, understanding what CSA is all about, understanding the key differentiators between CSA and CSV would help you answer these questions. And that would eliminate probably 50 to 70% of the internal challenges that you would have within your organization. And then now, when it comes to the technical implementation, this is where AI kicks in, because a lot of your folks internally probably would be scared of this transition. They've always done it a certain way, and now you're asking them to do things a completely different way. Well, this new way is much better, much more efficient, and it improves the outcome, improves the process, improves the end results. So AI kicks in where you implement a system that would allow you to automate the workflow, build some concepts within your software that would allow you to implement CSA seamlessly. We've done this at Hematogenix, we've done this at other organizations, and the implementation has been very successful. You have to your side a very good team to support your consultants like compliance group, and that would assure the end result would be the desirable results basically from your implementation.
Thank you, and I appreciate the commercial for compliance group, but that's great. I heard the word challenge in your, and this is the only one I picked on, and I want to go to Louie and just talk a little bit about the challenges facing when implementing, because I know within Abbott, you guys don't just deal with non-product software, you got product software. And let me make that statement here, maybe that question will come up later. Can we apply CSA to product software? The answer is the guidance specifically states SAMD, SIMD is out of scope. However, there are processes all around that. So I want to go to Louie and see what he thinks about that and what kind of challenges you're seeing implementing CSA, since you're technically in the process of doing it. So if you can share some of that insight, whatever you can share, by the way.
Sure, no problem. I think it's one of the first steps is make sure that there's good understanding of what CSA is. And a lot of the challenges come up because of lack of understanding what CSA is trying to accomplish. I had questions similar to, well, if we go from CSV, computer software validation, it's something that the FDA is requiring. And what do you mean, we're not doing CSV? And the answer is, you are going to validate your systems. It's just the way you go about doing it is a much more efficient way. And once you go into the details of what the principles of CSA, then the mind shift starts to happen. Okay. The second thing is to kind of, when you talk about challenges, is making sure that you're partnering with the right and the key stakeholders in the organization. So the larger the organization is, probably the more you have to reach out to more individuals that are impacted by this, make sure that they are on board, they understand what this is, and really take them on the journey with you. Listen, don't try to force it in, try to be more of a listener and try to explain and provide the documentation, evidence, or whatever you need to kind of help educate the stakeholders on what's the desired outcome. And I think, Khaled, you mentioned it at the beginning, which is, product quality, patient safety is really our ultimate outcome. And we want to be compliant. That's definitely one of the goals. And CSA will definitely allow, that's basically the roadmap to get there without having to load up trucks of documentation and spend, years of creating paper for the sake of storage. So I think that's, in my opinion, some of these challenges that we had to go through as well.
Thank you. And again, really, you mentioned, staying compliant, becoming compliant. So really the other objective, and really what started all of this with CSA, is let's focus on quality, and quality not equal to compliance, or compliance not equal to quality, right? Let's focus on quality. By default, compliance will occur, right? And I think nobody else than Mr. Conrad, because he's been in quality for many, many years. And I know you've seen that slide about FDA view of automation and how the FDA actually support this transition to automation. right? So Garth, there's one question here that really, if Mr. Cisco Vicente was here, I would have asked him that question. But since you are one of the veterans of MDIC, you were one of the first contributors to FDA and MDIC initiatives, specifically the Case for Quality, where actually CSA was born from that Case for Quality initiative. Can you provide other examples of other work, other industry that they're doing this to, to help the industry move forward, which you kind of touched on it a little bit on the previous slide, but I want to hear some more of your experience at other organizations.
Yeah, I think the important part for those that don't know what MDIC is. So MDIC is a not-for-profit organization that was really set up to create a forum where FDA and industry can interact and have open discussions about what are the challenges that are ongoing. What are the things that we need to be doing as we're looking to improve how we conduct business across the medtech industry as a whole. So it's created a forum where there's an opportunity to discuss and bring up whatever subject matters you want without fear of, a lot of times companies have fears of repercussion if I can't tell the FDA that, or we can't talk about this. But, in the case of CSA, there was a discussion early on that occurred between industry and FDA that basically was around a lot of the activity that we're doing is non-value added. We're going to present you 1,000 pages of documentation when the reality of it, there's probably about 20 pages that are in there that are important to you. So why do we continue to go through this approach to things when both sides know the value is not there along those lines? So it was really focused on, well, how do we step back and talk about what is important, what the end goal was of what we were trying to achieve. That same approach within the MDIC forum, or I should say the Case for Quality forum, which was supported by FDA, took a look at a lot of different things. So we looked at metrics that are being used in the organization. We looked at another initiative that was born out of there was how do companies get to a forum of being able to establish maturity of their quality systems, and that maturity of their quality system then becomes the communication with FDA and prevents or eliminates the need for FDA to come into their facility. So there's been pilot operations that have gone on with that. There's been look at, there's a lot of the things that are here, design controls. We've looked at things around how do you approach the newest one right now coming through MDIC is how do you approach digital twins, and how are digital twins going to change the interaction in between industry and FDA on approvals of products or validation of manufacturing processes and all that. So it's really a great forum to get those things out, be able to talk with the regulators about, and be able to change sort of the perspective that we as industry want to help FDA move towards a better approach to things. So CSA came out of that. I think the important thing about the CSA approach and what was established as part of MDIC, what came out of that initiative, is if you look at every other area where FDA governs or MedTech has controls in place, there's a risk-based approach to the things that you do. Risk-based approach to how you validate a manufacturing process. Risk-based approach to how you design or conduct design verification and validation of new products that are coming through. The challenge is under CSV, there was not a risk-based approach. There was a one-size-fits-all for everything. So it was naturally taking the things that are done in other portions of how controls are established and moving them over into an area that was basically 30 years old from a methodology or an approach perspective for control.
And thank you for that. I mean, risk-based approach has been addressed in Game 5, right? In so many different pages. However, as industry, we just, made sure everything is high risk, right? So, so we really never walked the talk. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you.
Should I? Yeah, I see there's a question on the risk-based approach that came through, and I just want to comment. I know Garth mentioned briefly. The question is, what's the difference? CSV, CSA. You know, we've always talked about a risk-based approach. What changed, right? I think with CSA, there's a bit more focus on applying the risk-based approach. You know, with CSV, it's always been like, here's what you have to do for each phase of the SLC. These are things you can go after. Traditionally, most companies, at least from my experience, have gone at risk-based from just reducing the number of documents and, oh, this is a lower risk application. I'm going to combine some documentation. I'm going to get 2 approvals instead of 4 approvals on this document. So the focus was more on a documentation. With CSA, it's shifted into more, let me look at and apply some critical thinking to my functional requirements and requirements that I have for this application. And where do I have the highest risk, you know, to product, patient safety, et cetera. And let me spend more time focusing on those and apply less effort on the ones that have lower risk or low risk or no impact to patient safety, product quality. So it really allows you to tailor that level in a way that you can apply it, you know, effectively on the project. And that's the biggest difference in my opinion.
That's great. Thank you, Louie. And the slide that we're looking at here, you know, we might think, you know, CSA, again, it's only applicable for software, you know, validation per se, right? And as Garth had mentioned, risk-based approach, and again, CSA, the label, right, that we've been talking about, like I always call it, it's the sexy label for GAM5, right? GAM5 has been in existence for so many years, and yet no one is following it. The minute we put the label CSA, and thanks to John Murray, actually, who came up with the word assurance, right? Computer software assurance. Let's assure that this system, right, works as intended, right? He goes, the word, and for those of you who do not know John Murray, he was one of the initial author of the GPSV, okay, that was published back in 1997, revised in 2002. He's always talked about risk-based approach, but the word that stuck in our mind is validation, because we validate product, we validate processes, equipment. We might as well validate software, so we applied the same size that we do for product and etc. on computerized systems, right? And therefore, in our industry, the life science industry or the regulated industry, innovation, digitization has been really slow moving, right? Where other industry, finance and others, they're way ahead of us, right? And I think now we're at the point, just because of the era we're in, we're moving toward digitization, right? So, and I think I'm gonna go back to Garth here and see where else do you expect CSA methodology? Because again, I'm looking at it, since there's no change to the regulations, right? The regulation still says exactly what it says 30 years ago. But where do you see a risk-based approach also applied on design control, design excellence, operation excellence? Where else do you see it applied?
Yeah, you know, if I think forward, one of the things I just mentioned, there is a new initiative coming out from FDA. You know, I think it was actually announced a couple of years ago, and then obviously there's been some delay in the last 2 years because of other focus in the country. But there's going to be a heavy focus on what's called the Advanced Manufacturing Clearinghouse. And what that is about, this effort, is about looking at digitizing, I'll say everything, digitizing your product, digitizing your manufacturing process, and looking at different approaches to, rather than physical product testing, physical product development, that you really approach it from how you mimic it in a digital environment. So before you ever get into the physical environment of things, you can identify where your problems are, resolve those prior to ever getting to, in essence, a validation, a physical validation that you're doing. That approach, I think you'll begin to hear more probably, I'll call it in this first quarter of 2022. You'll hear some more from FDA, and there'll be some more activity around that within these industry groups that are out there. What's important with that is, again, digitization of product and digitization of your manufacturing processes comes along with software. Again, and you're going to have to go through this approach of validating those systems that you're using to help out with that sort of revolution or new way of looking at things. So CSA will play into that as well as we look at the risk approach or risk scaling of the activities that you're doing along those lines. So a new application that will be coming through relatively soon.
Awesome. So we should look forward for another webinar so you can tell us all about it, right?
At some point, maybe.
Great. Mohamad, again, giving your role now in Qryptek, supporting basically, again, folks like Abbott and other organizations like Hematogenix, becoming that consultant that's providing really that end-to-end solution. Where do you see the challenges as a vendor, right, of a specific regulated software applying CSA? Do you feel you're confident enough to defend basically your position? I'm applying computer software assurance to my product. Do you see advantage or disadvantage in your role?
Great. That's actually a very good question, and I wanted to touch on this. I had the note here that I wanted to touch on the challenges. So obviously, I want to give you an example. In a recent discussion with one of our clients, we were talking about CSA and CSV, and one of the individuals within that discussion, we asked them to explain to their managers the difference between CSA and CSV. And mind you that this person attended educational seminars, I hope they did attend them to the end and they paid attention, but when they explained it, they actually failed to explain the major differences. They were trying to implement CSA, at least in the way they explained it to their top management, on top of CSV. So they were saying that CSA is the way that we use assurance to make sure that our validation protocols and our validation of systems are done correctly. And right there, management started talking about the SOPs and the policies and the procedures that they put in place. And they said, you know what, we're already done implementing CSA. We already have steps in place and we have processes in place that are put to make sure that our validation processes and protocols are done correctly. At that point, we had to step in. And that's why I want to talk about and emphasize on the importance of actually educating yourself and understanding the subject very, very well. Because obviously CSA is not CSV and CSV is not CSA. It's a completely different concept. It's critical thinking. You're applying critical thinking now to the most critical parts of your software or your product. You're not trying to validate everything. In the past, CSV main purpose was to actually overwhelm the auditors, produce a lot of documentation, like Garth said, thousands and thousands of pages that you would put in front of an auditor and try to satisfy all the requirements, or even maybe try to approach it from perspective that anybody can run this scripted testing or this method. And when was the last time you had, you asked somebody off the street or even the FDA agent to run the testing? It doesn't work, and they will never be even willing to do it or able to do it. The idea behind critical thinking and applying risk assessment and risk-based approach and trying to reduce the steps and focus, like Louie said, on what matters most and what contributes to that patient safety at the end of the day is what every organization should focus on. So, again, I emphasize on education, making sure that first you understand the topic that you're talking about very, very well. You shift away from the mentality of CSV and trying to understand what CSA is all about. You have a lot of industries now implementing this. Tesla, for example, they're, before they allow you to download the full drive version of their software, they subject you to 100 hours of monitored driving. So they monitor your driving, your behavior. You have to pass the test with 100% score before they allow you to actually download their full drive software. And that's a risk-based approach. They're trying to do a risk assessment on you as a driver and make sure that you're not endangering the pedestrians or anybody else on the road. And by doing this, they're eliminating that risk on you as a driver and on them as a corporation. And that's exactly what we have to do. We eliminate the risk. We do a risk-based approach, and we apply critical thinking. We educate not only top management, but also our team as well. So everybody involved in the process, from the lower level engineers to the top level, they have to understand what they're doing, and they have to understand the new approach of doing things, and that's going to guarantee your success.
So one question on that. You said they do a risk assessment on that driver, right? Do they test that driver while drinking too? Okay.
Well,
we won't go into details about Tesla. Question actually to Louie. Louie, what you're looking at, again, this is a new approach to validation. What are the most difficult concepts to get across to your organization out of what you're looking through on the screen right now from trusted data? So go ahead.
Well, again, this is more based on my personal experience, right? So I'm sure others have a different, but I think it's to get the last piece here, number 6, which talks about unscripted testing, is the most difficult to sell, because I think no one will disagree with you when you say we want to automate, we want to use do vendor audits and lower our risk, and we want to focus on using a risk-based approach, right? But when you say now, we're going to do unscripted testing, I think it's just the term gets people immediately uncomfortable, right? And let's make sure that we address that myth immediately. It is unscripted does not mean undocumented. You are still going to document. You are still going to provide objective evidence. You are still going to demonstrate and assure that that function is performing as intended, per the requirements. It's just a matter of, it's a lower risk item within your application that you may not need to go through the depth of testing and do all the permutation and et cetera. So it's just, again, this is where the critical thinking that Mohamad was just talking about is, people say, well, what do you mean? Are you insulting me? Are you saying I'm not applying critical thinking? No. Well, honestly, today we're not, because we're just saying if it's a low risk, we're just going to do this way, high risk, we do this way, and everything applies to everything, right? This is now you're going to the next level down, and you're really trying to accept that risk, in a way that I'm going to focus on what matters most, what's going to impact my patients, I want to make sure my application is meeting the intended use, and so on. And that's what matters most, and that's where the effort should be.
Thank you. Garth, anything you want to add here? Or what is the most difficult concept?
Yeah, well, so I'll sort of take off of one of the questions that's come in from the attendees as well, and this is around the question itself was right sizing validation scope. So I think what it was meant is, rather than using category of software from a GAMP perspective, should you really focus on the impact of risk to product quality or safety to patient? And my answer to that is you consider both. I think it's important when you consider the type of software. So if you're custom designing something and writing the code, you have to have a lot more focus on that. But I think even as you're looking at a broad category of custom or whatever, you have to look at the functionality that you're presenting or that software is taking care of. So just because it's custom doesn't mean you have to do the highest level of validation or control that's on it. You really have to look at what the end use is of that and the risk associated with that end use. So if I write custom script that changes the color of the screen blue, I'm not real worried about the risk to a patient associated with that. If I'm writing custom script that defines whether a product is outside of its expiry date, that might be something I want to focus a little bit more effort on from a validation perspective.
I agree.
Okay.
Great. Next thing here, and I think we've all been there and we've seen that, right? I guess to each of you, because I know you've been through digital transformation somehow, one way or another. What stages are you within, specifically CSA, as you're going through this? So we'll start with Louie here on the right. Digitizing. I know you're working on a lot of other stuff. Where are you here?
I think from a digitizing perspective, not a CSA, but from digitizing the SLC activities and so on, I think we're at probably, I don't know if you go from depression to acceptance. I think you probably go from bargaining to acceptance or something like that. We're definitely not depressed. We're at the point that we're at selling the adoption, basically, of the digitization and using tools across, the organization and showcasing the value that the tools can provide. And I'll sum it up in a couple of things. When you digitize, you have, especially if you use automated tools, testing tools, you have better coverage. You have dynamic traceability between your requirements and your test scripts and your defects. And you also eliminate any documentation and tester errors. So by just virtue of achieving those three items right there, you really have improved the quality of your application. You've eliminated errors up front and you've reduced your cost.
Thank you. Garth, I know you're going through a very large digital transformation. Where do you see your opinion, not where the organization is, from your perspective?
We're in all 5 of these buckets at the same time. I think that's the challenge, is that when you look at any change initiative across the large organization, you've always got people that are on board that are helping to drive it. You've got people that are challenging it throughout, people that are angry because we're not doing what we were doing before that they know of, and they may lose control of what they thought was originally there. And I think you're also always in bargaining mode. How do we make this change without showing the least impact to the organization, but gaining the best benefit along those lines? So I think it's everything. I think hopefully over time, a lot of the other buckets begin to wane down, but and finally everyone gets to acceptance. But I think you just have to realize that with any transformation within a company, you're going to be in all of these buckets at the same time.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Mohamad, last words?
Oh, yeah. So the slide actually from Qryptek as a consulting company, we come across all different stages, all those 5 stages. We've seen them before. And all I have to say is that, honestly, if you're not a forward-thinking organization and you take advantage of the digital transformation, you will never be able to stay in the game and be able to compete and meet expectations. So, you have tools like AI and machine learning right now, predictive analysis. They're all becoming standard tools of any successful organization. We have to use them to our advantage. We have to use them even in the healthcare industry. The most common factor right now, at least for this discussion, when it comes to precision medicine and personalized medicine, these are areas of medicine that are just, emerging in the past 10 years, 15 years. Everybody is realizing that one treatment doesn't fit all patients that are diagnosed with the same disease. You have to basically tailor your treatment. You have to go after personalized medicine because that's what it is. And now that's becoming easier than ever before because you do have tools like AI and machine learning, predictive analysis that would tell you and predict for you your outcomes. So we have to get away from the one size fits all because it doesn't work. It never worked in the past. In the past, we didn't have any insights or reporting or AI that showed us that it didn't work, but now we do. So if we continue with that mentality that one size fits all, then we'll be stagnant. We'll stay where we are. Forward-thinking organizations will take advantage of the tools available to them right now. We'll digitize. We'll go through the transformation and the headache. But you know what? That will pay off big time down the road. And I think this is the only way to transform.
Thank you. We have I'm going to stop the slide here. There's really a couple more slides, but really I'm going to focus on the questions that are coming from the audience. One question is from Suman. How do I set up the procedures, i.e. how do I need to move from CSV procedure to CSA procedure? Please call 1-800 compliance group and we'll give you but I mean, I think all three of you gentlemen are going through that or have gone through that. Can you just shed some light, anyone, on that? So how, what do I need to move from, what do I need to do to set up the procedures?
I'll throw out there one real quick. I tell you, go find a coach, and that coach may be an outside company like a compliance group that can come in because of the level of experience they have. It might be somebody that within another company that's gone through the transition. I think it's important to look at that experience because the people can bring to you what the challenges are that they've looked at. The advantage of going through a company like a compliance group is they've seen multiple implementations, so they bring a broader experience in terms of where the challenges are along those lines. But the biggest message is get yourself a coach or a mentor to help out as you do the transition.
Yeah, and thank you for selling us. But also, again, if you guys don't want to use a consultant firm, please look at the ISBE GAMP recent good practice guides. There's a lot of good information on there that would help you really start the ball rolling. And you don't want to purchase anything? Look at the current GAMP. Really decipher the current GAMP. The current GAMP exactly tells you how to transition from the old classic CSV to the concept methodology CSA by just applying risk-based approach and focusing not on business requirement, focusing on patient, right? Patient, product, data integrity. All right, moving on to one more question here. We have risk-based approach defined as a part of our risk management SOP. Say if it is low, no need for an OQ. If it is medium, do only positive, and if it's high risk, we do challenge testing. We do FRA, and we always end up, we say 80% of the requirement as high risk. Yeah, that's typical. As high risk related requirements, and we end up doing challenge testing almost. So we are still doing complete validation. So in this case, CSA may not apply. I mean, I am just trying to understand the thin line between CSV and CSA. So really, in other words, this is very similar to the first questions. You have to have the open mind to really understand the risk, the high risk, apply high risk. And I think, Garth, you gave a very good example on the color of the screen versus, I can't remember, right? So you want to give the other example?
Expiration date.
The expiration.
Yeah. I think Louie's probably got a better example of what they've been through from an Abbott perspective. So,
not so much of an example, but I just want to say if you're going, for the person who's asking the question, if you're going through the exercise and you're ending up with most of your requirements are high risk, then you probably need to go back to your risk grid and what are those categories? How did you define high, medium, low? And I agree with Khaled. Go to GAMP, see what they have recently published as far as that classification. I agree with Garth. Bring a coach in because you need both. You need to make sure to understand what GAMP is saying and what's out there, and you need to have somebody walk you through the process. Without the two, you're not going to be successful. You cannot do it on your own because you cannot self-assess, and it's just would be a much harder sell within the organization, and you may not be able to do it.
Thank you. Chris, I think we're almost 1 minute away. Is there any other questions coming in?
Not as of right now, folks. We do have a 1 minute, 2 minutes left. If you have any questions, enter them in the questions pane of the application, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. I'm just looking through the list right now. I don't see anything else as we speak.
Great.
So if you want to touch on this slide, Khaled, go ahead.
Yes, so definitely, and I know that we can do the poll now. Actually, to me, this is could answer those questions that came in. How do I do it? How do I start? Right? It's all about awareness, right? You need to really understand what's going on. Who else is doing it? And now, obviously, we got 3 organizations in front of you have applied it. Assess your current process, right? It's always good to either get it assessed internally or externally to see really how far you are, right, from best practices, from the current regulations. We've seen tons of things, right? We can't really share, but anyway, and then you get into the alignment, right, of to the current standard of CSA. But then in parallel, as you're doing that, we totally recommend a pilot for any low or medium risk system. Pilot it, see how it works for you, right? See how you can actually understand it, right? And then training. Training is the most important part because you really want to get folks onto what they really, what's really important, the changes, right? And I know Abbott, the top notch when it comes to training, let me tell you. And it's so important to get them there. And then implement, right? But then digitize, right? CSA alone, yes, you will definitely see reduction in cost. You will definitely realize the value. But to see really the real value is when you digitize your paper process today, you move to CSA and you digitize it with an application lifecycle management. Okay.
Yep, and we're just showing the results of that poll right now. So the majority, with the level of progression, with the roadmap you just showed, Khaled, again, they're still becoming aware and learning more about how to apply and implement CSA.
Awesome. Definitely want to thank you gentlemen for joining me today. It's always fun to have a round table with you, and we'll do this more often, hopefully through 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for everyone, and I hope the rest of the audience enjoys their transition as they start into CSA. It's a great approach. I really encourage everyone to think hard about going through it.
Awesome. Thank you all very much.